August 8, 955 AD, in the German city of Augsburg. Bishop Ulrich was the city's church leader and now its army leader. He stood on the walls and watched an army arrive to kill everyone inside. They came from the east. Thousands of soldiers on horses spread across the flat land like a dark stain. Their movements were organized and well practiced. These were the Magyars, the horse warriors who had scared Europe for 50 years. This was not a quick attack on a lucky target. This was a planned fight to take the city. The Magyar group had sent a very large army, and their goal was clear. Augsburg would be captured or it would burn. Ulrich was about 60 years old. He was a high church official who had spent years managing church business, fixing altars, and settling arguments over land. Now he found himself leading the defense of a major German city against an enemy that was an expert at destroying things. The group of defenders was small. Old records say Augsburg's army defenders were in the hundreds, not thousands. They were a mix of real soldiers and regular townspeople with weapons. The walls were stone, which gave them an advantage, but Magyar armies had broken through walls before and food and supplies were low. If King Otto I, the first ruler of the German lands, didn't arrive with his army in a few days, Hungary would win even if the Magyar army could not. Ulrich had already sent messengers south. They rode hard through land that might be filled with enemy scouts. It was not certain if those messengers reached Otto or if Otto could arrive in time. What was certain? The Magyars were here, and they had come not just to steal but to take over the land. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. If you like this story, and if you find it helpful to learn how a church leader and a desperate king changed the history of Europe, please hit the like button and leave a comment. It really helps this video reach more people who love history told honestly. Now let's understand how we got to this moment, because what happened at Augsburg in August 955 was not a single event. It was the end of 50 years of fear. The Magyar attacks into Western Europe began around 899 AD, after they moved into the area near modern Hungary and the lands around it. People writing at that time across Europe wrote about their arrival with a mix of fear and confusion. Some writers compared them to the scary Huns from long ago. Others didn't know how to describe them at all. They used simple names like Eastern barbarians or just the Hungarians. What made the Magyars so strong in battle was the way they fought. They were amazing horse riders trained from childhood to shoot bows while riding. They used special bows that could shoot through metal armor from far away. Their favorite plan was moving fast and shooting at the enemy from far away. They also used fake retreats to trick the enemy into a trap. Unlike the heavy soldiers of Western Europe, Magyar warriors chose moving fast over heavy armor. For more than 50 years, Magyar groups of hundreds or thousands of riders attacked places across the old empire. Records show attacks in Bavaria, Saxony, and even as far as Burgundy, northern Italy, and southern France. Old records describe an attack in 926 that reached deep into German land. Liutprand of Cremona, an Italian writer, wrote about Magyar armies threatening Italian cities. These were not wild, messy attacks. They were planned military moves made by an organized group. The damage was terrible. Monasteries learned to hide their treasures before the attacking season. People in the countryside made warning systems using church bells and signal fires. Leaders built walls, often quick wooden fences that only gave them a little time instead of real safety. Europe was split into many small parts, which made fighting back together almost impossible. Individual leaders fought alone, often with very bad results. The Battle of Pressburg in 907 near modern-day Bratislava saw a German army badly defeated and their leader was killed. Similar losses happened throughout the early 900s. But by 955 the situation had changed. Otto had gained more power. After years of fighting with other leaders and his own brothers, he wanted to be more than just a king. Otto wanted to be the Holy Roman Emperor. To do this, he had to show he could protect all Christian people. The specific reason for the 955 Magyar attack seems to be that Otto messed with Magyar politics. Otto had helped some leaders against others, and the Magyar leaders saw this as a direct challenge. Records suggest the 955 army was larger and more serious than usual. This was meant as a move to punish Otto, and maybe a try to take permanent control over the land. Which brings us back to Augsburg. The city sat at an important crossroads. In southern Germany, if it fell, Otto's whole southern border would fall apart. The Magyars knew this. Ulrich knew this. And somewhere to the north, riding with his army, Otto knew it, too. The Magyar forces that arrived at Augsburg on August 8th did not attack right away. Records suggest that they first moved into spots around the city. They blocked the roads so no one could leave and started to cut off the defenders. This was a normal way to attack a city. Starve the soldiers, wait for them to lose hope, then make them surrender or attack the weak walls. Bishop Ulrich's reaction is written in many places. He personally organized the defense. He checked the walls and put his few soldiers in the best spots. According to later stories, he gave the people both religious and practical leadership. We aren't sure if he actually fought with a weapon, but it is clear that Ulrich did not run away and he kept order inside the city during the crisis. The defenders had one advantage: stone walls that could not be burned easily or broken without big machines. The Magyars were great at fighting in open fields and quick attacks, but not long city fights. But time was against Augsburg. Food supplies were limited, and every hour that passed without help made it more likely that the city would have to choose between being hungry or giving up. On August 9th, Magyar soldiers tried to attack the walls, looking for weak spots. There are not many details, but the fight was active, not just a blockade. And then scouts brought news that changed everything. Otto was coming. The king had gathered his soldiers and was marching south with an army. The Magyars now had a choice: keep attacking the city and risk being trapped between the city walls and Otto's army, or leave the city and meet Otto in an open battle. This was the kind of fight where Magyar plans usually won. They chose to fight. On August 10th, 955, the armies would meet on a flat field by the Lech River, the Lechfeld, and the future of Europe would be decided in blood. But who was the man riding to save Augsburg? And what made him risk everything on a single battle? Otto was 43 years old in the summer of 955, and he had spent nearly 20 years fighting to stay alive. He became king in 936, getting a kingdom that was split by war and families fighting for power. His own brothers fought against him twice. His son-in-law, a man named Conrad the Red, had betrayed him just 2 years before. He led a rebellion that almost tore the kingdom apart. Otto stopped these rebellions, but it was very hard. He could no longer trust anyone. Now, in August 955, Otto rode south with an army that included many of the same men who had recently tried to kill him. Making peace back then was less about being friends and more about what was needed. You made peace with yesterday's enemy, because tomorrow's threat was worse. And the Magyar threat was very dangerous. If Augsburg fell, the land would fall apart. If the land fell apart, the Magyars would take control over the southern border forever. And if that happened, Otto's dream, the one he'd spent 20 years chasing, would die. Otto didn't just want to be king. He wanted to be emperor. The title Holy Roman Emperor had been empty since the death of Berenger in 924. For 30 years, no leader in Western Europe had the power or the blessing from the Pope to claim Charlemagne's old title. Otto wanted to change that. But emperors don't just ask for crowns. They earn them. And you cannot be the protector of all Christians if you cannot actually protect them. This meant the Magyars had to be destroyed. Not just beaten, not just pushed back, but destroyed. Otto's son, 16-year-old Ludolf, rode with the army. The prince had also fought against his father in 953 along with Conrad the Red. That fight failed. Ludolf gave up, but the relationship was still hard. Back then, there was a simple way to fix the name of a disgraced leader. Send them to war to show they are loyal by fighting, or don't come back. So Otto rode south with an army of former rebels, a disgraced son, and the hope of an empire that didn't yet exist. The Magyars had no idea what was coming toward them. But it wasn't just anger and wanting power driving Otto's army forward. It was something the Magyars had never really faced before. A single German army built for one purpose. An old writer named Widukind, a monk who lived near the time of the battle, gives the most detail about Otto's army. According to his writing, the army was split into 8 parts. Modern historians argue if this was a real army plan or just a story, but what we know for sure is that Otto's army was a group of different people. The main part was Saxon, Otto's own people, tough soldiers from his northern lands. Saxons had spent years fighting other tribes on the border and attackers from the north. They were well trained, loyal to Otto, and knew how to fight long wars. The Bavarians joined from the southern lands. These men really wanted to win because Magyar attacks had destroyed their homes many times. Duke Arnulf of Bavaria, the brother of the previous leader, led these soldiers. They knew the land and understood Magyar plans from bad experience. From the Swabia region came soldiers under Duke Burchard III, a young leader in his early 20s. This area, which is now part of Germany and Switzerland, had also suffered from many Magyar attacks. Burchard brought several thousand men, including good horse soldiers. Another group brought soldiers from central Germany. From Bohemia, a kingdom to the southeast, came a group under Duke Boleslav. Boleslav was a partner of Otto. His soldiers would guard the very back of the army and the supply wagons. This sounds like a less important job, but it would be very important. The whole army likely had between 7,000 and 10,000 men. Old stories claim much higher numbers. Some say there were 10,000 horse soldiers alone, but modern historians don't believe those big numbers. Moving the army, the number of men available, and the speed of Otto's march all suggest a smaller, faster army. What made this army dangerous wasn't its size, it was what it was made of. The main part of Otto's military power was heavy cavalry. These were armored horsemen with spears, swords, and metal armor. These were not the light horse archers of the Magyar army. German horse soldiers fought in a tight group. They made strong charges meant to smash through enemy lines with their weight and speed. Helping the horse soldiers were foot soldiers with spears, shields, and axes. They could form defensive walls or help the horse soldiers. Old battles were not just about horse soldiers. Foot soldiers were like the base that the horse soldiers used to hit the enemy. But tools alone didn't win battles. Training did. And Otto had spent years training his soldiers by fighting many wars against tribes, northern attackers, and his own rebels. His army knew how to march in a group, stay organized while being shot at, and move together. The Magyars used speed and confusion. Otto's soldiers relied on staying together. There was one more thing in Otto's army, though writers only mention it a little. Otto carried the Holy Lance, which people believed was the spear that hit Jesus during the crucifixion. Old armies fought for land, money, and to stay alive. But they also fought for symbols, and the Holy Lance was a message. God is with us. Whether the soldiers believed it or just got courage from the symbol is hard to know. What matters is that they marched, and among them rode a man with nothing left to lose. Conrad the Red was a powerful leader until 953, when he made the terrible choice to fight against his father-in-law, King Otto. The fight failed. Otto took away Conrad's land and titles but did not kill him, partly because Conrad was married to Otto's daughter, partly because old politics sometimes chose making peace over punishment. Conrad kept his life and his freedom, but his honor was gone. In 955, when Otto gathered his army to fight the Magyars, Conrad asked to join. Records don't say what Otto said, but Conrad rode south with the army. He was not a leader. He was a duke with no land, a general with no power. But he had a sword, a horse, and one chance to die as something other than a traitor. Old society worked on a person's name. A man's name was important for many years. Conrad's name was ruined. His children would be ashamed unless he fixed it. In 10th century Europe, fixing a name had a simple plan. Die in battle, hopefully in a brave way. Widukind wrote that Conrad fought like someone looking for a brave death. This was not just being reckless. It was a planned sacrifice. Conrad understood that staying alive meant being a disgrace. Death meant being remembered well. He would get his wish at the Lechfeld. But first, the armies had to meet. Otto's soldiers moved very fast. They traveled to Augsburg in days instead of weeks. Speed was a must. Every hour they waited gave the Magyars more time to break into Augsburg or leave with stolen goods. Records suggest the march was very hard with almost no rest and long travel. When Magyar scouts told their leaders Otto was close, they had to make a choice: keep the city surrounded or fight. They chose to fight, and they were very sure they would win. For 50 years, Magyar armies had beaten German armies in open fields. They had perfect plans that made heavy horse soldiers tired and frustrated. They had speed, experience, and the mental lead of winning for many years. Otto had training, a desperate need to win, and heavy horse soldiers. On August 10, 955, both armies met at the Lechfeld. This was a flat area by the Lech River just south of Augsburg. Bishop Ulrich watched from the city walls as the armies gathered far away. The city was no longer surrounded, but the result was not certain. Everything now depended on what happened in the next few hours. And for Conrad the Red, riding somewhere in that army, the way to fix his name was finally clear. He just had to die well. But the Magyars weren't riding into this battle with no plan. They had leaders, a strategy, and 50 years of wins behind them. They looked at Otto's army and saw the same heavy horse soldiers they'd been beating for decades. So why were they so sure? And who were the men leading them? The Magyar soldiers gathering at Augsburg were led by two men whose names appear in many records from that time, Bulksu and Lel. Bulksu had a high title, which was like a general or a high leader. But his background was more than just leading an army. According to an old writer named John Skylitzes, Bulksu had traveled to the city of Constantinople in the 940s, where he was met by Emperor Constantine VII. During this visit, he was baptized as a Christian, which was a move for politics. Being baptized meant he was part of the emperor's group and a possible partner. Bulksu went back home, quickly gave up being a Christian, and started attacking Christian lands again. This was not rare in the politics of that time. Religion was often a tool for deals, and leaving a religion, while hated by Christian writers, was sometimes a smart political move. What this shows about Bulxu is that he was practical. He understood Christian politics, had seen other powerful armies, and chose to stay with the Magyars rather than follow a foreign emperor. By 955, Bulxu was an expert leader with many years of experience. He had led attacks deep into German, Italian, and French lands. He understood how Christian armies fought, heavy horse charges, relying on armor, and not moving fast. And he knew how to beat them. Lel is mentioned less often in the old records, but his place as a leader is well known. Later stories from Hungary link him with a horn, the Lel horn, and say he used it to kill Conrad the Red while a prisoner after the battle. This is likely just a myth. Conrad died during the fight, not after. But the story's existence shows Lel was a very famous man. Someone whose memory lasted a long time in Magyar stories. Together, Bulxu and Lel led an army that records describe in many different ways. One writer claimed the Magyar army had tens of thousands of men. Another suggested similarly huge numbers. But these writers had reasons to make the enemy numbers bigger. It made Otto's win look more amazing. Modern historians looking at how to feed an army and the number of people living then guess the Magyar army was between 10,000 and 20,000 warriors. This was still a very large army for that time and much bigger than a normal Magyar attacking group. It was a major use of the Magyar group's military power. The army likely had thousands of light horse archers, which was the main Magyar plan, along with some heavier horse soldiers with swords and spears for close fighting. Unlike earlier attacks, this wasn't a fast-moving group. The Magyars brought supply wagons, followers, and food for a long war. This was a move to take over, not just to steal. And Bulxu knew exactly how to fight German heavy horse soldiers. From the Magyar view, the battle at Lechfeld gave them every advantage. They had fought German armies many times and won. The Battle of Pressburg in 907 had destroyed a German army. Attacks during the 920s and 930s had met very little organized defense. Even when German forces tried to build defensive armies, Magyar plans always won. Shoot with arrows, pretend to run away, lead the enemy into traps, and avoid a direct fight with the heavy horse soldiers. The plan worked because it used German weaknesses. Heavy horse soldiers were great in a close fight, but they were slow, got tired easily, and struggled against fast enemies who refused to stand and fight. Magyar bows could shoot accurately from far away while riding, letting them hurt the enemy without ever getting close, and their horses, which were smaller and tougher than German war horses, could move for days without getting tired. Otto's army didn't have any surprises. It was the same army system the Magyars had been beating for 50 years. Yes, it was larger and better organized than some earlier German armies, but being big meant moving slower and being harder to feed. More men meant more mouths to feed and more trouble staying together during a fight. The land also helped the Magyars. The Lechfeld, the flat area by the Lech River, was open ground, great for moving horses. There were no narrow spots to stop movement, and no walls to stop them from moving fast. It was the kind of field where Magyar plans were the best. Also, the Magyars had the lead. They had chosen to stop surrounding Augsburg and meet Otto in battle. This wasn't because they were scared. It was because they were sure. They could have moved east with their stolen goods and not fought at all. Instead, they put themselves in a spot to destroy Otto's army and break German defense forever. There was also a mental part. For 50 years, Magyar attackers had been the fear of Europe. Entire areas planned their lives around avoiding Magyar attacks. Monasteries buried their gold. Villages built warning systems. Leaders built walls. Even a rumor of Magyar horsemen coming caused a panic. Otto's soldiers knew this. They had grown up hearing stories of Magyar attacks, of villages burned, and of armies losing. They marched south with that weight. Bulksue and Lel led men who had never lost a big fight against German forces. Their warriors had spent their lives learning to fight on horses. They had speed, experience, and the confidence that comes from never losing. Otto had heavy horse soldiers and a desperate need to win. On paper, this shouldn't have been close. Magyar battle. Plans were flexible, but some patterns were always the same. The normal plan started with scouts finding the enemy, the land, and possible spots for traps. Once the battle was close, light horse soldiers would move forward in loose groups, shooting arrows at the enemy while staying out of reach of a counterattack. The goal was never to destroy the enemy right away. It was to make them tired, mess up their groups, and find openings. If the enemy moved forward, Magyar soldiers would run away. Sometimes they were really running, and sometimes it was a fake retreat, meant to lead the enemy into traps. Christian writers described this trick many times, always with frustration. German leaders knew about the fake retreat. They warned their troops. And yet, many times, soldiers broke their groups to chase what looked like a fleeing enemy, only to find themselves surrounded. If the enemy stayed still, Magyar archers would keep shooting, waiting for the soldiers' training to break or for them to run out of supplies. Waiting was a weapon at the Lechfeld. Bulksue likely planned a version of these tricks. The Magyar army was large enough to try to surround Otto, sending groups to hit Otto's sides or back while the main army fought from the front. This needed good teamwork, but would give a big win if it worked. Records from that time suggest the Magyars put their camp behind their main army east of the field. This was normal, giving them a place to go back to and keeping their supplies and followers safe. But it also made a weak spot, one that would be a disaster. Because while Bulksue understood German plans, he had never fought Otto specifically. The Magyar leader knew how German armies usually fought. He didn't know what Otto would do when desperation and many years of war experience met on one field, and he definitely didn't expect Conrad the Red. The armies gathered on August 10th. Magyar scouts reported Otto's soldiers marching south along the river, their groups tight and their training holding. Bulksue gave orders. His warriors got on their horses. Bows were ready. The camp was safe. In the distance, German flags appeared. Groups spreading across the field. Heavy horse soldiers in the middle. Foot soldiers on the sides. Bulksue had beaten armies like this before. He would beat this one, too. What happened next would show that he was very wrong. The morning of August 10, 955, was clear over the Lechfeld, and both armies made their final plans. The Lechfeld was not just any field. It was a flat area south of Augsburg, made by the Lech River as it flowed north toward the Danube. The ground was mostly flat, great for horses, but it was crossed by water channels and had some muddy spots where floods had been. To the west were hills with trees, to the east more open land went toward the river. The field was about 2 miles wide, enough room for thousands of horsemen to move, but not so big that armies could stay away from each other. For the Magyars, this was perfect ground. Open space meant they could move. Their light horse soldiers could circle, attack, and run away without being trapped. It was the kind of land where their plans had destroyed German armies before. For Otto, it was a nightmare. His heavy horse soldiers needed solid ground to charge, and tight groups to hit hard. Muddy spots and channels could break up the groups. Open space gave the enemy room to avoid a fight. And if his troops stopped following orders to chase Magyar tricks, they'd be killed one by one. But Otto did not have the choice to find better ground. Augsburg was behind him. Its life depended on this battle. Running away meant leaving the land. Waiting meant giving the Magyars time to get ready or leave with their stolen goods. So the armies got ready where they stood, and the land would play its part. Wittgenstein describes Otto's army as split into 8 parts, though historians still argue about the exact plan. What's clear is that Otto split his soldiers into different units, each with their own leaders and jobs. The front part, the forward groups, was made of Bavarian soldiers. These men had a personal reason to fight. Magyar attacks had destroyed their homes many times. Putting them at the front wasn't just a plan. It was for their spirit. They would meet the enemy first, and their bravery would set the tone. Behind the Bavarians came groups of Swabians and people from central Germany. These were the main part of Otto's army, the corps that would take Magyar attacks and stay in a group under pressure. Otto himself led the Saxon groups toward the back middle, a spot that sounds like a defense, but was actually smart. Old battles were messy, and leaders needed to be able to move to help in a crisis. By putting himself in the middle but not in the very front, Otto could see the whole field and move soldiers as needed. The 8th group, the back guard, was given to Duke Boleslav and his soldiers. This spot was very important. The back guard protected the supply wagons, which had food, money, and extra tools. It was also the group most likely to be surrounded if the enemy got behind the main army. Old records don't say where Conrad the Red put himself, but his job as a disgraced leader trying to fix his name suggests he rode with one of the front groups. He was close enough to the fight to show he was brave. Otto's plan showed he was thinking about defense. He wasn't planning a big attack. He was getting ready to take Magyar attacks, stay together, and wait for a chance. The group was tight. Units were put close enough to help each other, leaving no gaps for the Magyars to use. Foot soldiers likely made protective walls around horse units, giving them a safe spot if Magyar horse archers tried to surround them. And at the middle of it all, Otto carried the Holy Lance. Old records mention this many times, suggesting it was very important for the soldiers' spirit. Whether the soldiers believed it gave them God's help or just got courage from it, it did its job. Unity. The Germans weren't just an army, they were a statement. We will not run. The Magyars got ready with the speed that was part of their way of fighting. Instead of straight lines, they formed loose crescent shapes. Horsemen spread across the field in groups that could quickly come together or move apart. Bulksu put the main army, likely several thousand horse archers, facing Otto's middle and front. These warriors would start the fight, attacking German groups with arrows while moving fast. But the key to the Magyar plan was the side groups. Some soldiers were sent far out, especially toward the southern edges of the field, where they could circle behind Otto's army. The goal was a classic move: pin the enemy in front, then hit from behind. If they could hit Otto's supply wagons, they'd cause panic and force German troops to break their groups to save their supplies. It was a plan that had worked before. In 907, being surrounded had destroyed a German army. In many attacks, Magyar soldiers had moved fast to surround and beat slower Christian troops. On the Lechfeld, they would do it again. Except this time, one of those side groups would find Boleslav's soldiers, and what happened next would decide everything. There's a moment before every big battle, after getting ready, after final orders, and before the fight when armies just wait. Records don't describe this silence, but it must have been there. Thousands of men watching each other across open land, knowing that, in an hour, many would be dead. The Germans stood in tight groups, shields together, horse soldiers staying in place. The training Otto had given them through years of war would now be tested against the fastest enemy in Europe. The Magyars sat on their horses, bows ready, looking for weak spots in the German lines. They had fought German armies before. They knew what to expect: heavy charges, not much movement. Getting tired, eventually. This would be another win in a long line of wins. From Augsburg's walls, Bishop Ulrich watched. He had held the city for 3 days, buying time for Otto to arrive. Now the result was out of his hands. Either Otto's army would break the Magyar army, or Augsburg would be attacked again. This time with no hope for help. For Conrad the Red, somewhere in the front groups, this was the moment his whole life had led to: fixing his name or dying. There were no other choices. For Otto, this was the most important moment of his rule. Winning meant becoming an emperor. Losing meant the Magyars would rule southern Germany for another lifetime, and his dreams of being emperor would die on this field. And for Bulksu and Lel, this was supposed to be easy. Destroy another German army, take control forever, and go home as winners. Then the first Magyar horsemen moved forward, and the Battle of Lechfeld began. In minutes, Otto's plans began to fall apart. The Magyar horse archers came forward in waves. Not in a solid line, but groups of riders moving up, shooting arrows, then turning away before German soldiers could fight back. This was their skill, learned over many years. Magyar warriors learned to shoot from a horse as children, practicing until they could shoot accurately while riding at a fast gallop. Their bows, made from layers of wood and animal parts, could shoot through metal armor from far away. And they didn't need to kill. They needed to provoke. Arrows hit the Bavarian front group. Shields went up. Men hid behind them, feeling the arrows hit wood and leather. Some arrows found gaps, a throat, a leg with no armor, or a horse's side. Soldiers screamed. Horses were scared. The natural human way to react to being shot at is to make it stop. For horse soldiers, that meant charging. Get close. Start a hand-to-hand fight, and make the archers defend themselves instead of shooting. The Bavarians stayed in their group. Duke Arnulf, leading the front, kept his men in their spots, taking the arrows. This took amazing discipline. Soldiers died slowly, one arrow at a time, while the enemy was too far away to hit. Every instinct screamed to attack. But Otto's orders were clear: hold your spot. Do not break the group. Do not chase. Because 50 years of Magyar wins had been built on one trick, the fake retreat. And sure enough, after a few minutes of attacking, the Magyar horse archers suddenly turned and ran. It looked like panic. It looked like the German army had scared them into leaving. It looked like a chance. It was a trap. Some Bavarian soldiers started moving forward. Leaders shouted at them to stay back. The group shook but stayed together. The Magyar horsemen ran back 100 yards, then stopped, turned, and started shooting again. This happened again and again. Move up, shoot, run back. Move up, shoot, run back. They were testing German training, looking for the moment when anger was stronger than orders and troops broke their group to chase. Otto's soldiers stayed. This was the first surprise for the Magyars. German armies had broken before. Christian horse soldiers trained for hard charges and glory in battle had many times left their group to chase a running enemy only to be surrounded and killed. It was expected, but Otto's army was not normal. They stood in tight groups and took the arrows. Minutes passed, then an hour. The Magyar attacks continued, but German training held. People were hurt. Records don't give exact numbers, but shooting arrows could hurt many men. without breaking the group if soldiers stayed together. Bulxu watched from the Magyar side. The front attack wasn't working. The Germans followed orders, better than the armies the Magyars had fought before. But Bulxu had expected this might happen, which is why he'd already sent a side group south to circle behind Otto's army and hit where training wouldn't matter. Duke Boleslav of Bohemia led the 8th group, the backguard, put at the southern edge of Otto's army, guarding the supply wagons. The supply wagons were everything. They had food, water, extra weapons, medicine and money, coins, church items, and riches that helped pay for wars. Lose the supply wagons, and an army became a messy crowd. Soldiers would break their group to save their things. Panic would spread. The Magyars knew this. While the main Magyar army attacked Otto's front, a group, records don't say the exact size, but likely thousands of horsemen, circled far to the south, using the land and dust to hide their move. Boleslav's soldiers were the first to see them coming. The Bohemians were tough warriors, expert fighters who had fought with and against German soldiers for years. They were not bad at fighting, but they were outnumbered, alone away from the main German army, and facing an attack they didn't expect. The Magyar side group hit fast. Horse archers rode in, shooting many arrows into the Bohemian groups. Then, heavier Magyar horse soldiers with swords and spears charged into a close fight. Old battles were messy at the bottom level. Soldiers only saw what was right around them, the enemy in front, the friend beside them, and the ground. Understanding the plan went away in the noise and fighting, and for the Bohemians, what they saw was scary. Magyars coming in from the south, trying to surround them, moving toward the supply wagons that had no guard. Boleslav tried to stay in place. Old stories say he organized a defense, trying to put his soldiers in a protective line between the attackers and the wagons. But the Magyars didn't need to break through. They just needed to cause a mess. And they did. Part of the Bohemian group fell apart. Whether they ran away completely or just got messy is not clear, but the result was the same. The supply wagons were open. Magyar horsemen rushed forward, reaching the wagons. Followers, people who traveled with the army but didn't fight, ran away or were killed. Wagons were tipped over, and supplies were taken or thrown around. News of the disaster went up through Otto's army. This was the most dangerous moment. Otto's front was still fighting, taking Magyar arrows. His soldiers were following orders, staying together. But training doesn't matter when soldiers think their food, their things, and their way home are being destroyed behind them. If panic went from the back to the front, Otto's whole army would fall apart. The battle would become a massacre with German soldiers breaking up while Magyar horsemen killed them. 50 years of Magyar wins had followed this plan: pin the enemy in front, hit from behind, and watch them fall apart. It should have worked. Conrad the Red, the disgraced leader, former rebel, and son-in-law to the king he had betrayed, was in the front German groups when news reached him that the back was falling apart. Records don't say what he thought. We don't know if he talked with Otto or just acted on his own. What we know is the choice he made. Conrad turned his horse soldiers, likely a group of a few hundred or maybe 1,000 men, away from the main German army. Instead of facing the Magyar army attacking the front, he turned south and charged toward the back guard that was falling apart. This was a crazy move for a normal plan. Breaking the group during a battle went against every rule of old fighting. Made gaps in the line that enemies could use. It split the soldiers when staying together was the only way to live. But Conrad wasn't thinking about normal rules. He was thinking about fixing his name. If the supply wagons were lost, Otto's army would panic and fall apart. Someone had to save the back right away, no matter what it cost. And Conrad had nothing left to lose except the one thing he'd already lost, his honor. He made his horse go south, and his soldiers followed. Behind him, Otto's front line stayed in place, still taking Magyar arrows, not knowing that the battle was being decided. In another spot, in front, the Bohemian backguard was falling apart. Magyar horsemen were all over the supply wagons, and thousands of soldiers' lives depended on whether Conrad could reach them in time. Conrad's horse soldiers hit the Magyar side group. From the side, there was no fancy move, no careful plan. It was a desperate charge by tired heavy horse soldiers hitting lighter Magyar horsemen who were busy stealing from the supply wagons. Surprise gave Conrad a few seconds of lead. His armored horsemen smashed into Magyar riders who weren't ready for an attack from that way. Spears broke. Swords were used. Men died before they knew what was happening. But a lead for a few seconds doesn't last. The Magyars got ready. Their lighter horsemen pulled back to make room. Their archers started shooting at Conrad's soldiers, finding gaps in armor and hitting horses. And their heavier horse soldiers, men ready for close fighting, moved to fight. Conrad's charge had stopped the back from falling apart right away. The supply wagons were still being fought over, but they weren't alone. The Bohemians, seeing help arrive, gathered together again. But now Conrad's group was stuck in a hard fight in the southern part of the field, away from Otto's main army, fighting hard to keep the back from falling apart completely. And Otto, standing with his Saxon groups in the middle, had an impossible choice: send more soldiers to help Conrad and make the front weak, letting the main Magyar army break through, or leave Conrad alone and risk the back falling apart anyway. Old battles were won by leaders who made the right choice in moments like this. Otto made his choice. Otto didn't send help. He did something the Magyars never expected. He attacked from his spot with the Saxon soldiers. Otto could see the whole field splitting up. To his front, Magyar horse archers kept attacking, arrows falling, soldiers dying, and training holding but getting weaker with every man lost. To his back, Conrad's soldiers were in a hard fight around the supply wagons. The immediate crash had been stopped, but Conrad's soldiers were alone, surrounded, and losing men. A careful leader would have sent help to save the back, fix the weakness, make the group strong again, fight slowly, and wait for the Magyars to get tired. Otto had spent 20 years fighting rebels, traitors, and other leaders. He understood that being careful in war often meant a slow death, and he saw something that changed his mind. The Magyar main force had thousands of horse archers bothering the German front lines. They decided to launch a direct attack. They were very close and focused on the German lines, thinking their side attack was winning. This meant they were not ready for a big German horse charge. Otto's heavy horse soldiers had been standing in line for over an hour. They were being hit by arrows and teased by the enemy who stayed just out of reach. Every part of their training made them want to fight back. They really wanted to charge. Otto gave the command for everyone to move, not just one small group. An old book says Otto held up a holy spear, a special object believed to have God's power, before telling them to go. We don't know if he truly believed in it, or if it was just for show. What mattered was how it worked. His soldiers saw their king risking everything on one big attack. The Bavarian group went first, then the Swabians, then the Franconians. Wave after wave of heavy horse soldiers charged one after another, getting faster and stronger. It was the most dangerous choice Otto could make. If the charge failed, his whole army would be spread out and tired. The Magyars would kill them one by one. But if it worked, the Germans could reach the enemy before the fast Magyars could move away. Then the battle would end fast. Otto rode his horse forward with the Saxon groups. The ground at Lechfeld shook. Heavy horse charges were the most important part of German war, but they were hard to do. A good charge needed everyone to work together. Horses moved at different speeds, and groups that started close together could drift apart. Riders had to stay in a straight line and hit the enemy as one big group, not as single riders. Timing was very important. Charge too early and the horses would get too tired. Charge too late and they would lose their power. The ground mattered too. Bumpy land, wet mud, or hidden holes could break the group apart during the charge. The Bavarians hit first. They crossed the open land faster and faster, walking, trotting, then running. The Magyar horse archers saw them coming and tried to run away like they always did. But this time, they couldn't get away fast enough. The German charge was too quick, too well planned, and covered too much space. Some Magyar riders turned away and escaped to the sides. Others were not fast enough. German spears hit their targets. The force of a heavy soldier on a big warhorse hitting a light pony was a total disaster. Men and horses fell down. The Magyar groups, which were meant to be loose and fast, fell apart completely. Then the Swabian group hit. Then the Franconians. Each new wave crashed into the Magyars, who were already struggling from the first attack. The horse archers used to move freely, but now they had no room to move at all. The Germans were too close, forcing them to fight hand-to-hand where the Magyars were weak. Magyar warriors were good fighters who had traveled across Europe, but they were built for speed, not long fights. Their armor was thin. Their bows and swords were great from far away but not as good in a close fight against heavy armor and long swords. The Magyars tried to change their plan. Their heavier riders and leaders moved forward to meet the German charge. For a few minutes, the battle became a messy, grinding fight. Both sides were stuck together, and no one could get away. A writer named Liutprand wrote shortly after that the fight was terrible, though he didn't give many details. Another writer named Widukind said the fighting was fierce and lasted for hours, though writers back then often exaggerated. What is clear is that the German charge did exactly what it was supposed to do. It stopped the Magyars from moving around. The horse archers could not run away to reset and shoot arrows from far away. They were forced to stay and fight, which is where the heavy German horses won. The way of fighting that had beaten Christian armies for 50 years was now stopped. But the battle was not over yet. The Magyar forces were hurt, but not finished. In the south, near the supply wagons, Conrad the Red's lonely group was still fighting to stay alive. Books don't tell us much about Conrad's final moments, but we know what happened. He died while fighting near the supply wagons. His riders had stopped the Magyar side attack from being a total disaster. But stopping a loss and winning a fight are two different things. Conrad's men were outnumbered, surrounded, and very tired. The Magyars saw that Conrad's group was all alone. If they could destroy it, they would still control the area behind the Germans. Then Otto's main attack wouldn't matter, even if it was winning. The Germans would be trapped between Magyar forces with no way out. Conrad's group fought in a shrinking circle, with enemies attacking from all sides. Medieval close fighting was scary and tiring. Swinging swords, blocking hits, and controlling scared horses. Minutes felt like hours. Armor protected them, but it also made them hot and hard to move. Men fell down from being tired just as much as from being hurt. At some point during this fight, Conrad the Red was killed. Nobody wrote down exactly how it happened. He might have been hit by an arrow, cut down by a sword, or just stepped on when his spot was taken over. Later stories say a Magyar leader killed Conrad with a horn while he was a prisoner, but that isn't true. Conrad died during the actual battle. What matters is that he died fighting at the most important part of the battle. His brave defense bought time for Otto's main attack to win. His death was noticed right away. Old battles were very personal. Soldiers fought next to friends and under leaders they knew. When a leader died, the news spread fast. Conrad's men could have run away. Their leader was dead, and they were surrounded. Running away would have made sense. But they didn't run. Maybe they stayed because running meant losing all their food and supplies. Maybe they stayed because breaking their line meant they would surely die. Or maybe they stayed because they were proud of Conrad for dying to protect the king he once went against. Whatever the reason, the group stayed together long enough for Otto's charge to change the whole battle. The turning point happened when the Magyar leaders started to lose control. Bulksu and Lel, who were with the main force, saw their front troops getting crushed by German horses. They saw their side attacks stuck at the supply wagons. And they saw their advantage disappearing. Magyar fighting relied on having space to move. Locked in one spot, their strengths went away. More and more people were dying, and the soldiers were getting scared because they were in a fight they couldn't win. At some point, the Magyar lines started to break apart. It likely started with small groups of warriors pulling back, leaving gaps. Those gaps grew. More warriors ran away. What started as a plan to move back became a messy escape. The Magyars were not cowards. They were smart warriors making a choice. Staying meant everyone would die. Running meant they might live to fight again. But running away in the middle of a battle was very dangerous. Once a group breaks apart, horse soldiers can easily kill them. The winners can chase down the losers and turn a retreat into a massacre. And Otto's horse soldiers chased them. This was no longer a battle. It was a hunt. What happened next was not heroic. It was done step by step. Old writers say the chase lasted for 3 days or went for a long distance. That is just a common way of saying it was a big deal. What we know for sure is that Otto's men chased the fleeing Magyars east. More Magyars died during the chase than during the actual battle. This was normal for wars back then. Most soldiers didn't die while fighting, they died while running away. In a line, soldiers protected each other. Shields covered their bodies, and staying together meant they couldn't be surrounded. But once they ran, they were all alone and could not defend themselves. The chasing horses could strike them from behind where they had no protection. The Magyars had faster horses than the Germans. Their small ponies were built to go fast for a long time. Usually, they could outrun German horses easily. But these were not normal times. The Magyars had been fighting for hours. Their horses were exhausted. Many warriors had used up all their arrows and had no weapons left to fight back. Also, the land was against them. Water ditches and muddy spots that were small problems before became death traps while running. Riders couldn't see them until it was too late. German horses kept chasing them without stopping. Otto's orders were very clear. Destroy them. Not just win but get rid of them. This was a smart plan, not just being mean. For 50 years, Magyar raiders had attacked, ran away, and come back the next year. Otto needed to stop that forever. He wanted the survivors to go home with stories of a total loss, not stories of almost winning. The chase went on for miles. Some Magyars escaped by hiding or riding hard for their home. Others tried to group up to fight but were surrounded and killed. Old books say the Germans hunted them down without mercy. One writer says thousands died. Another says the same. Modern historians think those numbers might be too high. Thousands was just a word writers used to mean a lot. But even being careful, it seems 3,000 to 7,000 Magyars were killed. The biggest blow happened when the Germans reached the Magyar camp. The Magyars didn't just bring soldiers, they brought their families. This was what people from the plains did when they went to war. The camp had women, children, old people, and workers who fixed tools. It also held all the gold and items they had stolen from towns and churches. When the Magyar army fell apart, the camp was left with no one to protect it. German soldiers reached the camp while the chase was still going on. What happened next is in many books, and it is sad to read. The camp was taken over. The people there were killed or captured. The stolen items were taken back. Animals were killed or taken. The camp was burned down. In those times, soldiers didn't distinguish between fighters and regular people. The Magyars had killed many people during their raids, so the Germans did the same to them. Books don't give many details, but the pattern was common. Men were killed, and others were taken away. This was how war worked back then, even if it was very brutal. Destroying the camp changed things for the future. It meant the survivors went home having lost everything, including their families. The wealth they had stolen was gone. The whole Magyar group realized that this loss was different from any other. Among those caught near the camp were the two leaders, Bulksu and Lel. We don't know exactly how they were caught. Maybe they were caught while running or near the camp. What we do know is what happened to them. Otto had them taken to Regensburg, a big city nearby. This wasn't just because it was close. It was a message. Regensburg had been attacked by Magyars for years. The people there knew the fear of seeing enemy horses. By killing the Magyar leaders in public there, Otto sent messages to everyone. He told his people their enemy was gone. He told any rebels that he was the boss. He told the Magyars never to come back. And he told the Pope that he was a great protector of the church. Bulksu and Lel were killed by hanging, which was a shameful way to die. Usually, important people were killed with a sword as a sign of respect. Hanging was for common thieves. Otto was saying these men were not noble leaders, they were just criminals. Many people watched the execution. It was meant to be a show. Later, Hungarian legends made up a story that Lel killed Conrad with a horn while he was a prisoner. That story made the Magyars feel better about losing, but it isn't true. Conrad died in the battle, and Lel was killed in Regensburg. By the end of August 955, the land at Lechfeld was quiet. The field was covered in thousands of bodies that would take weeks to clean up. Local people and prisoners probably had to do the hard work. Bishop Ulrich came out from behind the walls of Augsburg. His city was safe. The Magyar attack was over because Otto won the battle. Ulrich immediately started prayers to say thank you. People thought God helped the Christians beat the invaders. Whether it was God or just good planning, people believed the religious story. Otto stayed in the area for a few weeks to make sure everything was safe. Conrad the Red's body was found. He was buried with honor, like a hero who fixed his mistakes. His wife, who was Otto's daughter, was left to raise their kids knowing their father died a hero. In the Magyar lands, survivors brought home news of the disaster. They had sent maybe 10,000 to 20,000 warriors, and thousands never came back. The leaders were dead. The families were gone. The gold was lost. For 50 years, the Magyars had attacked whenever they wanted. They had beaten many armies and were feared by all of Europe. On August 10, 955, that time ended. But what happened next would decide if this was just one loss or a permanent change. The answer took years, and it changed Europe forever. On February 2, 962, over 6 years later, Otto went to Rome. The Pope crowned him as the Holy Roman Emperor. This was the biggest goal Otto had since he became king in 936. The win at Lechfeld made it possible. Being an emperor was not something you just got by asking. The title meant you were the protector of all Christians and the church. A king had to prove he was strong and good enough for the job. Otto proved both at Lechfeld. By stopping the Magyars, Otto did what no other leader could do for 50 years. He protected everyone from an enemy that scared many kingdoms. And he didn't just win a little bit, he destroyed them completely. This gave him power when talking to the Pope. The Pope needed protection from other leaders and Otto provided it. When Otto marched into Italy, everyone knew he was the man who crushed the Magyars. People who might have fought him changed their minds. The crowning ceremony in Rome was full of special signs. Otto received a crown, a golden ball, and a staff to show his power. He promised to protect the church, and the Pope blessed him. But behind the ceremony was real power. Otto now ruled the strongest land in Western Europe. His lands went from the sea in the north to the mountains in the south. The Holy Roman Empire would last until 1806. Even though it started long ago, Otto's crowning in 962 was its real beginning. Otto's son and grandson would be emperors after him. German kings would be the most powerful in the area for a long time. The system Otto built, a group of German lands under one king, lasted for generations. None of this was a sure thing. If Otto had lost at Lechfeld, the Magyars would have kept attacking. His power would have vanished. There would be no emperor and no Holy Roman Empire. Europe would look very different today. One battle in 955 changed the whole path of the continent. But what about the Magyars? The loss at Lechfeld could have destroyed them, but it didn't. Instead, it changed them. The time right after was very bad. Many were dead and their wealth was gone. The survivors went home with bad news. Their military leaders were gone, but their government survived. The Magyars were ruled by a high leader called a Grand Prince. In 955, the leader was a man named Taxoni. Taxoni had not been at the battle, which was lucky for him. It meant the highest leader was still alive and in charge. Taxoni had to make a choice. He could try to build a new army and attack again. Or he could accept that the raiding days were over and try something new. He chose to change. Over the next few decades, the Magyar group went through big changes. First, they stopped attacking the West. There were a few small fights later, but the big raids were over. The Magyars were not strong enough, and the risk was too high. Second, the Magyars started living in one place and farming. Usually, they moved around with animals. But their land was good for growing food, and staying in one place was safer. They built villages and planted crops. Third, and most importantly, they started becoming Christians. This didn't happen overnight. Taxoni stayed with his old ways. But his son, Gaza, pushed for the new religion. Gaza invited teachers, built churches, and started following Christian ways. Why did they do this? There were a few reasons. Being Christian made it easier to talk to other countries. Christian kingdoms liked to work with other Christians. It helped with trade and making alliances through marriage. It also made the leader more powerful because the church supported the king. It was a way for the Magyars to be part of Europe again. After their big loss, they were all alone. Becoming Christian helped them make friends. The change was finished under Gaza's son, Stephen. Stephen became the leader in 997. Around the year 1000, he was crowned the first king of Hungary. This was a huge change. The Magyars went from a group of tribes to a real kingdom like others in Europe. Stephen spent his life making this change stick. He set up churches and changed how people lived. Some people didn't like it and fought back, but Stephen won. By the time he died in 1038, Hungary was a recognized Christian kingdom with its own borders. The Battle of Lechfeld didn't make this happen directly, but it made it necessary. Losing forced the Magyars to rethink everything. Over 2 generations, they chose to join Europe instead of fighting it. The raiders became the Kingdom of Hungary, which lasted for a very long time. It was one of the biggest changes in history, and it started at that battle in 955. There is one thing people often forget about this battle. The eastern edge of the empire became safe. Before 955, the German borders were always in danger. People were always building walls and watching for enemies. It was a chaotic place. After 955, it became a real border. The difference is important. A frontier is a place where no one is in charge and there is constant fighting. A border is a line where countries talk, trade, and sometimes fight, but they accept each other. The Magyars stopped raiding because they knew they couldn't win anymore. German defenses were better, and the loss at Lechfeld showed them the danger. Over time, the Germans and Hungarians became friends. They traded and their noble families married each other. The border stayed quiet. This helped the economy and the people. Places that were once destroyed could now grow food and build cities. Churches didn't have to hide their gold anymore. Villages didn't need big walls. Because it was safe in the east, the Germans could focus on other things like fighting in the north or going into Italy. It created the map of Central Europe that stayed the same for hundreds of years. German lands were on one side, and Hungary was on the other. There were still some wars, but they were between countries, not against raiders. The whole relationship had changed. All of this happened because an army of Germans met an army of Magyars in 955 and Otto took a big risk. So, what did the Battle of Lechfeld really do? It ended 50 years of scary raids that killed many people and destroyed towns. It made Otto the most powerful leader and helped him become emperor. It forced the Magyars to become a settled kingdom and become Christians. And it made the borders safe so that towns could grow. But it did not destroy the Magyars. They kept their culture and their independence. It didn't bring perfect peace, but it changed the type of fighting. The battle was important because it forced both sides to change how they acted. Otto's win showed the Magyars they couldn't just take whatever they wanted. But the Magyars showed that they could adapt and survive. In August 955, many men fought on a field. Thousands died. The survivors told stories that lasted for a long time. Those stories about brave charges and leaders who died became the start of a new order in Europe. That is what happened at Lechfeld. It was a moment where history changed. But how do we know all this? Everything we know comes from a few writers who lived back then. Each writer had their own reasons for what they wrote. Widukind was a monk who wrote about the battle 12 years later. He gave many details, but he wanted to make the Germans look good. Liutprand was an Italian bishop who wrote about the same time. He focused on the religious side and probably made the numbers look bigger. A local church in the city Otto saved also kept a short record of what happened. These are good because they come from people who were close to the event. Even though the writers are different, they agree on the main facts. The battle was on August 10, 955. Otto won against a bigger army. Conrad died, the Magyar leaders were caught and killed, and the win was huge. They only disagree on the small details and the numbers. These writers were not like modern reporters. They wanted to teach lessons or talk about God's plan. We have to be careful when we read their work. When they say exactly how many people died, they are probably guessing. When they say God did it, that is just how they saw the world. There are no Magyar records from that time because they didn't write things down yet. We only see their side through old stories or items found in the ground. This means we mostly hear the winner's side of the story. We see German heroes but not much about how the Magyars felt. But the main story is true. The battle happened and it changed things. Soon, the battle became a legend. Bishop Ulrich, who defended his city, lived for another 18 years. He became a hero right away. His story spread all over Europe. In 993, he was named a saint. This was special. He was the first saint picked by a formal process by the Pope. Before him, people just decided someone was a saint on their own. The Church started to take more control with Ulrich. The Pope looked at his life and the miracles people said he did. Why does this matter for the battle? Because Ulrich became a saint partly because he defended his city during the battle. He became the protector of Augsburg. Every year, people celebrated him and remembered the battle. This kept the memory of the battle alive for people who weren't even born yet. Even when Hungary became a friend, people still remembered the fight because of the saint. History became a story, the story became part of the Church, and the Church kept history alive. Every big battle has lessons. Soldiers look at the horses and the plans. Otto's choice to attack even when things were going bad is seen as very brave. Conrad's death is seen as a way he fixed his past mistakes. Historians look at how the win gave Otto power. It shows that kings needed to be good at war to be respected. The battle shows how one day can change how countries talk to each other. Some see it as a story of how a group of people joined a new way of life after losing. All these ideas are partly true, but they are also simple. Real battles are messy. Thousands of people are making quick choices. Otto's attack could have failed if the Magyars had stayed together. Conrad's death could have been seen as a waste instead of a hero's end. We remember it as a great win because Otto won and became an emperor. If he had lost, we might not even talk about it today. The real lesson is that history can change on just one moment. The Battle of Lechfeld was one of those moments. In 955, the men fighting didn't know they were changing the world. They were just trying to stay alive and do their jobs. The meaning of the battle came later. Here is what we know for sure about that day. King Otto met the Magyars near the city of Augsburg. The Magyars tried their usual tricks, but the Germans stayed strong and attacked. The Magyars broke and ran. The chase was very violent. Many Magyars died, and their leaders were killed. Otto's win made him the most powerful man, and he became emperor. The Magyars stopped raiding and became the Kingdom of Hungary. The borders became safe, and a new time began. Bishop Ulrich survived and became a saint, which kept the story alive. That is the history. The rest of it, the hero stories and God's plan, is how people tried to understand it. But the fight was real. Men died, and the world changed because of it. On that day, 10,000 German soldiers faced a bigger force. The outcome was not certain for a long time. When the day ended, the path of Europe had changed. That was the Battle of Lechfeld. A day when men and horses decided what the next hundreds of years would look like. It wasn't fate, it was just people making choices and living with what happened. That is the story.